I mean, the government's completely lost control, hasn't it, of knife crime in Britain?
Well, today the Prime Minister is bringing more than 100 experts and those most affected by knife crime into Downing Street, and over the next 4 days to discuss what more we can do. There's a great deal of work that's been going on over many, many months now, but of course we're all very, very worried by these figures, and every single death is a death too many.
So do you accept you've lost control of it?
Well, I think, you know, we're very clear that this is about a multi-agency approach. It's not just about policing. Of course, that's really important, but it's about intervening early as well on young people to make sure that they don't think it's normal to carry a knife. So, for example, we've got our #KnifeFree social media campaign to really send that message out there. But we're also trying to take immediate policing action with
the
for
greatest,
example,
with
the
greatest
changes
respect,
to stop and search.
Well, that's twice I've asked you the question. You've declined to answer it twice about whether you've lost control. A hashtag is not going to stop young kids stabbing each other on the streets of this country.
No,
and
but
we're seeing day after day after day young people in this country killing each other with knives. And again, for the third time, I ask you, do you accept the government's lost control? And that's why you're having to now have this huge crisis summit today.
So I was giving it as an example of the spectrum of action we're taking. The reason the Prime Minister's having the summit today is because she has unique power to pull people into a room, and she set her ministers the task of ensuring that their departments all deliver on this. If we look at the public health approach, it's about making sure that schools are talking to other agencies in the local area when, for example, a child goes missing. It's about making sure that we have charities such as Red Thread in A&E departments so that we're reaching children at the teachable moment. But it's also about ensuring that law enforcement, when they do raids, that we've got safeguarding in action. Yeah. So, for example, with the National County Lines Coordination Centre that we've set up recently, in just a few weeks... Will you be telling her to put the 20,000... Will you be telling the Prime Minister when you see her today, given that she has all this power you're talking about, although most people think she's lost all her power recently, will you be telling her to put the 20,000 police that she took off the streets when she was Home Secretary, saying we didn't need them, back on the streets to reassure people that this country actually is taking this seriously? Well, we're seeing up to £970 million more going into policing from last year, and lots and lots. I think most police and crime commissioners are recruiting more officers. We're also seeing an additional £100 million specifically to tackle serious violence. Okay. So the 7 forces most affected by knife crime will be getting this money to help with surge policing and also to set up violence reduction units.
You're taking a different approach, a new approach to this. You want a public health approach to it, and you're asking schools to spot the signs of those at risk. You've already mentioned A&E departments, and we know that you're also asking the police to do more. But as Piers has already pointed out, since 2010, 20,000 police officers have been cut, and under your government there's been cuts to schools, cuts to mental health services and cuts to youth services. Your government's directly responsible for the cuts which have led to this problem, isn't it? And now you're asking all of those departments who have lost money under this government to step in and stop the problem that's been caused.
Well, we had to make some really tough decisions in 2010. If you remember, we inherited a pretty terrible
But can
economy.
you see that if you make cuts
we're in a better
to
place.
all of these services, you get problems like this? So retrospectively saying, well, we had to make cuts, clearly, this problem didn't emerge from nowhere. And now you're asking all those departments which have suffered financially to step in and solve the problem, which many people say the government is directly responsible for.
Well, it's precisely because we've managed to get the economy back in a better place that we're able to invest more in policing, we're able to invest more in schools, we're able to put that extra investment in. But let's not forget the major driver of serious violence is drugs and criminals, gang leaders. And so this is why we're having an independent review of drugs law to make sure that our laws are up to date, but also we're giving the police the powers they need. So just last week I introduced to the House knife crime prevention orders at the specific specific request of the police to help target a small cohort of young people who are carrying knives who haven't yet got criminal convictions. We're doing everything we can, both in terms of law enforcement, but very importantly, I think, in early intervention with our £200 million endowment fund, which is going to be invested over 10 years to help young people and help draw them away from being ensnared into criminal gangs. It's this sort of work that's going to pay dividends in the future.
Do you accept that there's a link between 20,000 cuts in police officers and an increase in crime? Or do you think, like the Prime Minister, that there is no direct correlation?
I think police, the police are really critical to this. Of course I do. We also accept that they are facing challenges that they just didn't face 10 or even 5 years ago with things like investigating historic child sexual abuse allegations, the rise of cybercrime and so on. So policing is changing in the 21st century, and this is precisely why we're investing more now with the extra £970 million with the help of police and crime commissioners, but also specifically the £100 million that will help the 7 forces most affected by knife crime invest on surge policing.
I can't work out from any of your answers whether you personally believe we need a lot more police on the streets, or whether you agree with Theresa May that taking 20,000 police off the streets was a good idea. What's your actual position?
I wish that putting more officers on the streets was the single answer that would solve serious violence. I mean, we all know
so just to clarify,
that it's not that serious. There are many reasons why people go out and carry a knife. The moment that a child takes a knife out of a household, they may not be thinking about whether there's a police officer there. They may be thinking about the threats they're facing on the streets in their local neighbourhood.
OK, so it sounds like you don't agree with putting more police on the streets.
I think police officers are really important, and as I say, we welcome the fact that police and crime commissioners are using the extra money that they're getting from central government and from local taxpayers. We welcome the fact that they're using that to recruit more officers.
Would you like to see more police officers on the streets, yes or no?
I'm a Home Office minister. The police are really important, and I'm always delighted when I see a police officer on the street. I want police and crime commissioners to make their own decisions about how policing in their local areas should be held.
As the Crime Minister directly responsible for trying to resolve this knife crime epidemic, would you like to see more police on the streets, which would be in direct contradiction to the Prime Minister, who doesn't think is necessary, yes or no? I'm not sure that reflects the Prime Minister's position, but the reason that we've announced this extra £100 million in funding specifically for serious violence is to help the police with what's called surge policing. So they target the hotspots in their local areas with very intense policing operations. So, yeah, of course, we sat in a room with chief constables and asked them what they needed, and we've given them. So you want more police on the streets?
We've given the chief constables what they've wanted in that they've asked us for this extra funding to help with surge policing.
But do you personally want more police on the streets, yes or no?
I'm a Home Office minister. I would always love more help on the streets, but also, as I say, it's not just about policing. Please don't make that mistake, because we must intervene earlier. Everyone we listen to.
Perish the thought that I would think there's any correlation between taking 20,000 police officers off the streets of this country and an explosion in knife crime and youth violence. Why would I possibly think that 20,000 police back on the street might teach some of these little kids a lesson that they shouldn't walk around stabbing each other? I must be stupid in this conversation. I'm the dumb one.
Presumably, you also want to target the leaders of the gangs who are ensnaring these often very vulnerable children.
I'd like to target them with the 20,000 police officers that you lot took off the streets.
Which is why
even now I'm trying to get you to say that was a mistake and we should put them back, and you don't want to do it. You don't want to upset the Prime Minister, who probably won't even be Prime Minister by the end of the week. It's why are you bothering to defend the indefensible when the person who did it isn't going to be there much longer? It's like, stand up and represent what most people in this country are actually feeling right now, which is utter fury at this knife crime epidemic, which is exploding around our ears. And the answer from you guys is, well, police aren't really the issue here. It's all far more complicated than that. And you're only saying it because Theresa May took 20,000 off the streets, so you don't want to criticise her.
if I may, I'm saying that we need to look. We need to look at we need to look at early intervention. We need to look at all the great work we're doing with the with the Youth Endowment Fund, looking at the work of St Giles Trust, Red Thread, all these really important organisations. It's not simply about policing.
No.
I wish it were that simple. I really do.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're investing more in policing, helping the police, doing as the chiefs asked us only a month ago, we're delivering on that.
OK, so just final question. Taking 20,000 police officers off the streets was a good idea?
As a Home Office Minister, I always want to support the police. That's why we're giving them more funding. The 20,000 officers was not at the behest of the Home Secretary. That was decisions of police and crime commissioners working under very tight budgets. I accept that, but it's because if you cast your mind back at the beginning of this decade, we inherited a really bad economy and we had to sort it out. We have done that, which means we now have more money to invest in policing, and I welcome and support the fact that police and crime commissioners are recruiting more officers.
So it wasn't a good idea to do that?
Piers, you can keep talking about police officer numbers.
I'm just trying to get you to say yes or no to what are very straightforward questions. Most people in this country, I hate to break it to you, but given you are the Crime Minister and it's your specific responsibility, most people in this country absolutely believe that yanking 20,000 police off the streets is one of the reasons why we're seeing such lawlessness on the streets. And when I try and ask you a simple, do you think it was a good or bad thing to take 20,000 cops off the streets, you can't give me a straight answer, which I'm afraid, whether you like it or not, sounds a bit slippery.
So the evidence, if you look at the last knife crime peak that we had in the mid-2000s, officer numbers were far, far higher, and yet we had a spike in knife crime. And we don't see, if officer numbers are the only answer, then we don't see correlating figures of police officer reductions and rates of knife crime increasing. This is the point. It's incredibly complicated. And of course, law enforcement and policing is a vital part of it. But actually, there's so much more about this. You know, why are children taking that decision to pick up a knife as they leave their front door, as they go outside? There are a whole host of reasons. And this is what the Knife Crime Summit today is about discussing and finding solutions across government.
Well, I hope somebody there says to the Prime Minister, you know, when you took 20,000 cops off the streets, bad idea, Prime Minister, and maybe the last thing you ever do as Prime Minister is to put them back.